I'm Shamel Lane, and I want to thank you so much for supporting the Day the Girl project. And I'm here with lots and lots and lots of scrapbooking talk for you. You can watch this anytime, just keep the URL, and you can come back anytime. So I don't expect you to have to sit down and study the whole thing and take it all away. You can watch in bits and pieces, and I'll put some helpful little jumps underneath so that you can jump to different parts of the video. But let's get started. I want to talk first, basically, I'm going to talk about all sorts of different things and just how I scrapbook. So it's kind of a little insight into my brain, I suppose, in what I do when I'm scrapbooking. One of the first things I wanted to do was take you through a page and talk about white space and how I arrange things on a page and what works well to my eye versus what leaves me a little unsettled. So I've picked out 2 photos that I'm going to scrapbook, and I'm going to talk you through the process. Haven't planned this out other than picking some paper, so everything else you're going to see is exactly as it happens. So I have these 2 photos, and my process is these are both 4x6 pictures, and I know that the layout that will be opposite this in my album already exists. And all of the pages in this album are from one particular day, and they're all in chronological order of the things we did that day, and the photos we took 30 seconds before we took these have already been scrapbooked. So I know what's going to be on that facing page. So that helped me make my first decision. That layout has a pink and aqua color scheme with a little bit of yellow thrown in. I didn't want the colors to be exactly the same, but I wanted them to work well together. So I looked for something that would have an aqua or turquoise single color print as my starting page. So this is from Studio Calico's Wonderland collection. It's actually a Christmas line. So the other side looks like this, and I'm going to use this turquoise side. And then I started thinking, how can I pull in some pink and yellow to go with the turquoise? Now the photos are very, very purple, and the other page started with that aqua because there wasn't purple in those photos. We were sitting in a kind of baby blue aqua colored car rather than the purple bus. So aqua seemed a more obvious choice there, but I don't want one layout to be really, really in that kind of softer tones and then the next one to be this kind of bold, brassy purple layout. So I think the purple photos on their own, that's enough purple for the page. So I'm going to use pink and yellow. So the first thing after I chose this, the next thing I did was go to my scrap basket. So I'm only looking at things that are not full sheets. Anything I have that's not a full sheet goes in one basket so that I can just flip through. And these were the 2 that came to mind first. They're not the same patterns that I used on the other page, but they have a similar color scheme. So this also has pink, it has aqua, and it has a little bit of yellow. And this one is great for cutting out, so I can cut out a few little pieces. I've got some gray options, I've got some yellow options, even a little bit of the aqua there. So those 2 came from my scrap basket. There's also some aqua to work with on this side, so I could use both sides of that print. Then I decided, well, I need some other elements that I wasn't finding in my scrap basket, so I went back to full pages, and I wanted something to pick up on this brighter pink and a nice neutral to work as the gray. So this gray polka dot I've used several times, and I'll use it several more times. It's a really great versatile print, and I love using gray as a neutral instead of, I use a lot of craft, I use a lot of black and white, but black, white, craft, and gray, those are my neutrals. I'll use those pretty much anywhere. So that will tone down the purple and keep it from being kind of explosive, because it will still make the purple really pop, but it will bridge the gap between the colors in the rest of the page and what's in the photos. So it won't be as if I made a page and then stuck purple photos on it later. I want it to look cohesive, so that neutral in the middle will help. Then 2 really bold prints, and one to pick up that pink. So this was a pretty good match for the pink, and it has gray and yellow in it as well. So that was Cosmo Cricket, the 23 collection. And this was an older Cosmo Cricket from Social Club. and with a yellow text print. And this just grabbed my eye, admittedly, just as I was looking for this one. And because these pictures are from the Harry Potter tour, and throughout the album that I'm making with all our photos from that day, I've tried to put book prints and text prints in wherever I could, put them into the embellishment and have them work. So I thought maybe letters would just be a good way to kind of echo that theme throughout. So I don't think I'll use much of this, but maybe a strip that will show the lettering and just let it be a subtle accent. So those are the papers that I've chosen, and now where do I go from here? Well, I know that when I use two 4x6 photos, I prefer them to be together. I want you to look at both photos as a pair, so I don't tend to separate them. The only time I might separate them is if I wanted to make a symmetrical page and have something go across the middle. But for me, if the photos are the same size, I don't like the gap in between. I want them to be unified, and you could do them on a mat and leave a little gap in the middle, but I just really prefer them absolutely stuck together and then maybe matted together or maybe put straight onto the background paper. It doesn't really, I don't really have a favorite either way. I had several different shots of this little picture, and the reason I chose these two is this one had the best facial expressions from all of us. We're all looking at the same camera because we had a few different people taking pictures on different cameras for us. And this one lets you see the detail on the bus, because this was the night bus, if you know the Harry Potter books or films. And so here on this one you can see the sign that says all destinations, nothing underwater, where this one, although it was the better shot of us, doesn't let you really know what the bus is. So this just gives it a little bit more detail. So those two help tell the story to me. I think I like them better this way because that means the picture where we're bigger is closer to the center of the page, so more likely to get your eye drawn into the people rather than the other extraneous details. And from here, I will start layering some pattern paper. So I'll set these aside for a moment. I'm pretty sure I'm going to mount those on that gray polka dot neutral. I'm just going to cut the branding strips and cut a few boxes to get started. At this point, I tend to have my photos ready to go and then a selection of different boxes from the different pattern papers. And I don't tend to do a lot of measuring or anything at this point. I just cut them to sizes that look nice with that particular pattern. So I cut nearly to the end of the points in the triangle and nearly to the start of the wide end of the triangle. And then just cut a little bit off the edge because I know I want my pattern paper border to go all the way around the page, so I want to make sure that everything's just a little bit shy of the 12-inch. And then this was a piece that was left over from that, and I just looked at the pattern and brought that down to a size that looked nice with what was there. And the same thing here, this one with the letters, I wanted to give it enough so that you could tell it was letters, but not so much that it would take up so much of the page or become a really overpowering element. And this one, like the triangles, I looked at the geometric of the design. This was one edge of the paper already, and so I just picked a similar spot in the pattern to cut the next piece. And that's something that I tend to come back to time and time again, is that idea of looking at the pattern and taking my motivation from there. So at this point then I'll just start adding blocks of pattern and color to the page, and I don't worry too much about overthinking it because one, I can change it if I need to, but also I can just keep adding more things on top if I don't end up particularly keen with how something looks. So in this case, for example here, I don't want to center it. I want this to be off to one side so that you see a little bit of this pattern along the side. But if I do that, then this piece is going to come all the way to the edge. So I'm just going to take a little bit more off that pattern, and I'll come back and re-ink that edge. I'm inking everything in black. I tend to pick one color, either black or brown, for each layout and then do all the edges to match. So this way I can have it offset and still have my aqua paper showing there. And I'll go to a narrower strip over the top of that and just move it offset to the other side. And so here, just the same, I'm going to need to trim that a little bit more. So that's kind of what I do instead of measuring. I just start with a shape or with a size, and then if it needs to be smaller, I come back and cut a little bit more. So I know at this point that I'm covering up a lot of the pattern paper. That doesn't bother me at all. If it does bother you, then that's something to identify and make sure that you don't do. You can plot out your layers accordingly. So this is a very, very quick process. And I'm using the pattern paper in the background, which has a design that repeats straight across the page. I'm using that as my guide for lining each of those papers up so that they can be nice and straight, but I don't have to worry too much. And this gives me a set of layers to start building the rest of my page on top. So I can come in and see where this is going to fit best. And I like to make sure that although I'm covering up a lot of the pattern, there are still bits and pieces showing everywhere. And the more things that you can make each piece touch on the layout, the fewer gaps in the white space you'll have, or the fewer gaps in the design. So white space it's basically a design term used in all sorts of graphic design. It's used in newspapers and magazines and all sorts of advertising, anything you can do with graphic design. White space is a pretty basic concept. And it's the idea of things getting stuck. End up with awkward spaces where things are not brought together. So let me just cut one of these little Polaroids to be able to give you some examples. Okay, so say I have this piece here. And it can naturally fit right there, and I have no trapped space because it's on top, everything is touching, I don't have any big gaps. But there are other places I could put this. If I put it here, I now have an awkward gap in between. And unless I'm adding more here to bridge the gap between the photos and this little embellishment, I end up with this gap that doesn't feel natural. It makes your eye go to this in not a good way. It makes you look at it and think, did that fall? Is it in the wrong place? Now, if I wanted it to go there because I wanted to bring the embellishment further down the page, there are definitely ways to do that because I can fill the gap in the white space. I can add other things. But the idea that it's trapped, this space is stuck there, just doesn't make for the best type of design. And there are two ways to get rid of it. Now, the trick is to stay consistent. I've started with layers, so the best way for me to remedy any trapped white space is to start layering things. Make the embellishments touch different layers of the piece. But if you have a more graphic style and you don't tend to layer up all the different pattern papers or all your different elements and you want a bit more breathing room, you can still use the same idea. You just need to give everything an equal gap in the middle. So that doesn't work in this case because I've layered everything else. But if I had this as one page element and this is another page element, then if I wanted to put another piece here, I would match up those spaces rather than make it kind of like this and then have something here and I'd end up with that gap in the middle. Does that make sense? I really hope so. So either if you want things layered, layer everything so that even just bring it up a little tiny bit is all it takes. It doesn't have to be a big massive, oh, I'm on top of the photo. It can be just ever so little touching the photo. Or you can underlap. You can pop it underneath the photo if you want to make sure that everything in the photo is on show. Or, so stay consistent, either all layered, or if you want to put margins in between everything, then just keep your margins the same size and you'd have the same effect to the eye. But either way, if you had all margins and then you had this awkward, everything else was a really small gap and this one was big, your eye's going to go right to it. And the same thing with layers. If you end up with this gap, if I end up with this and I have no other layers up here, I just have this awkwardly placed thing, it's not going to fit with the design. The trick again is to add more weight to it. So if I want to add embellishment to the top corner, I can either add more of these layers up here in a little kind of a mini version of this placed up here at the top, and that will give your eye something to connect, and your head will think, yes, those two things go together, that's fine. Or if I don't want to put more things touching the top of the page, I need to build up something that connects the photo to here. So build up a few more layers underneath there so that I don't end up with the gap here and then just this kind of random thing at the top. I really hope that makes sense. That's the concept of trapped white space, is that it's something to avoid, and you don't want to layer everything up and then end up with a gap that didn't mean to be there, because it will look like something fell off or it's unfinished. And the best way for me to remember how trapped white space works is look at the front page of a newspaper and then take out one word from a headline. And if you were to look at the paper and one word, especially in the middle of the page, were missing from a headline, despite the fact that you can't read it, it would be strange. A newspaper blocks everything up nice and neat. So to have this big space in the middle, you'd go, well, what was supposed to go there? And that's what I want to avoid with my scrapbook pages. The idea that something is missing, and then because you're thinking that, it's quite unsettling to the eye. Okay, that's enough talk about theory for the moment, so let's get making some stuff. So I do want to include this little Polaroid, so I'm just going to ink the edges on that one. I'm not going to adhere it just yet because I think I want some more things to go behind there, but I'll place it there and have a look for what else I'm going to include. Next stage is to just grab a few different things that might help. So I know I have this little camera piece. I decided to cut out another little piece from that same sheet that was just a partial Polaroid that has yellow on it, but I'm going to turn that upside down, and I'm going to plan on covering up the bit of orange that says cheerful. Not that that's not lovely, but I don't want to introduce orange onto the layout when I already have the pink and the yellow and the aqua going on. So I just want to use the yellow, so I'll plan something to cover that up. I've also grabbed some matching stickers. Those are Dear Lizzie, and then some hot pink thickers for my title. And some washi tape. Now, I said that I wanted to add something underneath this. I want to make sure that I add something to the embellishment so that it feels natural and it's, again, a matter of consistency. If I always just use a single embellishment like this throughout all my albums, it would look fine. Because many of my pages have more embellishment or more layers underneath an item like this, if I weren't consistent and I flipped from page to page, then you would look at a page that doesn't have those layers and think that it's not as important, or it didn't spend as much time, or it's just not as good as the others. So I like, if I'm working on all pages that will go in one album, it's not an absolute requirement for me, but it's something that I do tend to keep in mind, that I like to keep the kind of level of embellishment or the style somewhat consistent, just so that it doesn't hugely vary. Now, I have older albums that do hugely vary, so it's definitely not the end of the world for me, but at the moment with this particular project, it's something I'm thinking about. Okay, so because of that, I want to add some washi tape. I'm just trying to get this underneath the photo. And just a little bit of color and pattern there. And I've used these, well, especially the turquoise stripe, and I think I've used the pink one in that album as well. Did I make that wide enough? No. Okay, so sometimes you have to cheat. So I didn't tear it wide enough. Easiest thing to do is just tear it and separate it so that it will show either side. I think I'll do another layer of the pink so that it's in a 3. And then I'll put this on top. So it's not a lot I'm adding in more, just a little detail underneath. Now, I also want to work on this top corner, and I do want to build it from the top down rather than connecting it. So I went to my trimmer, and if I'm going to make a little cluster at the top, this is what I often do. I go to the pieces that I've already cut, and those little awkward pieces that end up just sat next to the trimmer, they're really useful here. So cut them down to some widths that would be smaller than the page. So I want to go at the most 6 inches, but I try and keep it underneath that so that this is obviously a smaller cluster. And then just kind of having a look at how these could be arranged, and then put this one on top. But that little piece, this piece, I've got the same problem I had with the tape. I want it to show a bit more on the other side, so the easiest thing to do is just to cut it and separate it because it's going to be covered. And everything's going to be slightly offset. And to piece this back together, I'll just use this as a guide so that I can make sure that the triangles are going to show. Actually, maybe put this one down first. Put the stripe of aqua over the top. It's going to cover some of the orange, but not all, but that's okay. I'll come back in now with a sticker or something to cover up the orange. So this one is a better color match. When I get to the small elements in the layers, then that's a handy place to add some dimension with foam squares, pop dots. And I do end up with these little squares everywhere, not only in my house, but they seem to follow me when I leave. So once I was having lunch with someone who was quite a, we were at quite a nice restaurant, and I looked down at the floor and saw all those little white squares, and my initial thought was, oh, how funny, someone else who sat here is also a crafter. And it actually took me about 5 minutes before I realized, no, they were just stuck to my dress and had fallen on the floor. It wasn't someone else that was a crafter, it was me bringing them there. Okay, so now I have a little cluster up here at the top. I do want to repeat other elements from the bottom to the top, so I want to bring in some of that washi tape. So I think I'll just tuck this under here, and if you are really forward thinking, you might remember to do things like that before you put the other elements on top. But this is honestly how I work. I don't tend to see those things until later. I like to put something on top and then go back and add more pieces underneath. It's why I use an adhesive that will come back up off the page if needed, because I need it too. If everything was stuck down fast, I would be absolutely in misery. So now I have this little grouping going on down here. I need to add my title, and for me the best gap is going to be right here. And if I look at the letters, if I take the one that's going to be at the very end, so the very last letter of my title, then I can use that one to figure out the placement and work backwards. So either that grounding line or this top line would work really well. But I think what's really easy to have happen is you get to this point in a layout and then you see the big gap here and you think, I need to fill it and put my title here, and then spell backwards. So your title would be in this space. But this is what really doesn't work for me. Instead of seeing that space and thinking, I need to fill it, so I'll just put my title in the middle, if you do that, you've then got all this trapped white space that doesn't connect the title to your photos and your journaling and anything else. You end up with a gap of space here in the background paper, and then this empty strip here that's not doing anything. And it's to the eye, if you like the layered look and you want to have something like this work out, you're much better off to bring that title closer. Bring everything closer and it will look like it was there on purpose. It's completely fine to have open space left on the layout. Don't feel like, oh, wherever there's a gap I need to put something. And I think that happens. I'm not quite sure why it happens. I know in the early days of scrapbooking there were lots of thoughts along the line of, you have this much page space, so you need to do as much as possible with it. And so if you left any gaps, then it was seen as a waste of space. But if you're doing it for the creative side of it, and you're not just wanting to put, 6 4x6 photos on each page or something like that, then it's a little more important to look at the balance of things than it is to use every square inch of the page, because empty space or white space can also be really useful to balance things, but it's best if it's at the edge so that it's not trapped and it doesn't look out of place. So if you have a layout that's going a bit skew-if and you're not completely sure why, or it's just not working, one of my immediate answers is whatever the page may be, take the title and move it closer to the photos, whatever it may be. And so many times that will absolutely save a page design if it wasn't working and it just felt disconnected, because bringing the title closer to the image will connect everything right back up. So that's a little bit of a tip to take away if you like that idea. Now, I know some people they won't be a fan. You prefer more breathing room, and the best thing about scrapbooking is there is absolutely no right and wrong. But since you come to my blog, I'm assuming that you at least like what I do a little bit. So that's my advice on that. Always bring it in closer. Okay, so I've got kind of a general title here. I'll probably add some more letter stickers. I've got this little grouping going up here. And this is the start of what looks like it will be a grouping, and that will be quite balanced. Now, I do this a lot. I balance things by going on the diagonal, something top and one side of the photo to bottom and the other side of the photo. And it's because it's how we read. If you think about how you look when you're reading something, and you're constantly going back and forth, and you're going from top to bottom, and then when you get to the next page, you're going back up to the top, and there's this idea that we look down and up. And the diagonal is just a very, I've really oversimplified that, but the diagonal is somewhere that our eye will naturally flow. And if you create the artsy, creative, for fun bits on the diagonal and put your important things, like your photos and your journaling, in the middle of that diagonal line, then your eye will go to the most important things. And the reason I call these the kind of fluffy embellishment bits, the fun stuff, and then the important bits being the photos and the journaling, to me, how I define that is this creative stuff is for me, but the story and the photos is for anybody who reads. I want my albums to make sense to people even if they're not scrapbookers. And I'm totally okay with people looking at my albums and being like, oh, I don't know, there's an awful lot of messing about with pretty paper here and glitter and all sorts of randomness. And that's not really important in life. It's not hugely important in life in the bigger scheme of things, but it's something I enjoy. So I want to make the embellishment go for something that's something that I like and that maybe other people will like, but they don't have to. If I design well and keep the focus on the things that anybody can understand, like photos and writing, then even if somebody laughs at how I spend lots of time and energy and effort and money on pretty pattern paper, they'll still see what I want them to see, that important stuff. Does that make sense? I really, really hope so. Can you tell that I really wish this was a discussion and you could sit here and nod and tell me, oh yes, I totally understand. And so I hope that you do. It's a little different to do a really, really long video where without any feedback. So anyway, okay, so next step. This is a large element that I want to become a group. So I want to then just take inspiration from what I've done elsewhere on the page. So I'd added this little pennant sticker with the word up here. It'd be great if I could find a coordinating sticker to add to this area of the page. So I'm just looking for which words are in the right colors on this sheet. And I think my best bet is to go with this one that says delightful. So what I'll do is I want to build a bit of embellishment here. So I know that I'll put this one on foam squares, so I'm going to do that, but I'm not going to take the backing off. And then I can try a few little things around here to see what else I can build up there. And I've used everything I've pulled out so far, so I'm going to pause it at another minute and have a look for maybe some die cuts or some sort of shaped element that I could bring over to this section. Here's what I found. I've got some mini market letter stickers in pink, some label stickers, two different kinds of tags, a rectangular one and a circle tag, a little heart die cut, and a little yellow ticket chipboard piece. So now my challenge is to figure out how to take those pieces and put them together to create something that will work alongside that little Polaroid. So the first thing that I tend to do is look at pieces that can or cannot be turned around. So this one has little hearts, and if I want to keep the hearts the right side up, the ticket, or the tag, the tag needs to stay this direction. So if I want to use the whole thing, it's going to be quite big and cover up quite a lot there. I could cut it down and use just part of it. The other thing I'm looking at this is that it has this white frame, and that makes a good spot to capture other elements and hold them. So I could take all these different pieces and kind of collage them into that space. But I think what would be my best bet is to make this less heavy. I've got one large piece here. I don't want so many big pieces. So I'm just going to be brave and cut it in half. And I'll ink this edge. And then at this point, I go ahead and I start sticking, because then I have to commit. So I'm going to line that up there. And then I start looking for pieces to bridge the gap between the different elements. So this kind of messy corner can be filled up with this circular tag. And I can come back in a little bit and add something to the top of that, so I don't just have the empty hole, but I can add a brad or some twine or something that will work well. And then I can add other pieces on top. So layering on top sometimes means that you need foam squares on one side of something and not on the other. So where the metal rim tag is already up off the page, I'm just adding the foam square on this side in hopes that it will then lay flat over the top of the tag. I think this is probably the best placement of this, because I've got the two different yellow elements, but they're not exactly the same color yellow. So if I put them together, that's going to be really obvious. If I put them slightly apart, your eye will forgive it a little bit more. So I think that's the best bet. So this diagonal tactic works in a small area of space as well as the full page. So I have a little bit of an embellishment in the middle, and then things on the diagonal to catch your eye. So the use of the two elements in yellow on a diagonal line. Put some ink on the edges of this little pink heart, and then find a place for him to live. So sometimes I just start moving things around. There's no magic formula so that I know exactly where everything's going to look best. It's just good to try it in a few different spots and see what works. And I quite like the idea of putting this down here, but I need to find the best spot. I think this actually works best here. And I want just a tiny bit of it covered up there. And I'm looking so that if I were to place it here, I've got a tiny bit of white from the Polaroid frame showing at the top that's trapped. So if I pull that back, it now touches the bottom layer there with the point of the heart, but I don't have any little gap of white at the top, so that is a better placement. And I have this kind of little gap over here, but now I've covered up all of that turquoise stripe washi tape, so I think that might be the best bet, is to add some of the washi tape back in again. I'm just finding a spot so that it's touching different layers, but they're all still showing, offsetting those different pieces. I'll come back to add something to there. I want something to fill this little gap. So maybe if I go back to this sticker sheet from before and find one of these smaller stickers. I think, oh, here's a little gray flower. I was going to go with the heart, but I wasn't quite sure why, but this little gray flower is a better bet. And that is a perfect fit, so that covers up all the white. So you wouldn't necessarily know that this pink piece with the little hearts on it is actually a tag. Now it's just an element of pattern paper there, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I might come back up and add this underneath, I think, because the color is a good match. So I might as well go ahead and include it. And now I have two little tag spots, so that gives me a space to repeat something. I'm just going to see if I've got some baker's twine that would be a good color match. I think I'll go with this very pink one because I'm out of turquoise. And so sometimes that's the reason for a decision. I have plenty. So I'll just tie this through both tags. At this point, I have a few little problems that I want to clear up before I call the page finished, and I haven't included everything yet. I don't have any writing, don't have the date, names, anything like that on here yet. But I can identify a few problem spots. So right here, I have this trapped white space between my title and this piece of the embellishment. So this is somewhere where I need to add something in. And I'm also not happy with the fact that this is kind of a grouping of two. I'd rather it be a grouping of an odd number, so to add another piece in here would be more balanced, especially where up here I have more pieces in the embellishment. So I'm looking for another little piece to add into that little cluster. And there's a little pink heart that matches that gray one. So that's a start, and then this is a spot where I think, I'm not particularly happy with the flower. I'm going to try something else. I think this area of the embellishment will be somewhere that I finish off with with some other elements at the very end, like some gems or pearls, enamel dots, that sort of thing. But I do want to make sure that I address that issue first. So if I bring this little date sticker in, that can overlap, go on a little bit of an angle to kind of just a tiny, tiny angle. Nothing big, just really, really slight angles. I can add in my date there. So I think this is a good spot for me to pause and add my writing. So if I were looking at the layout at this point, which I am, and figuring out where the writing would go, I have a few different options. I could add writing in this space. I could add writing in a column here, or just a small area here, or I can add my writing down here. And since this is the space that I know I want to fix because I have this trapped white space here, that's where I'm going to start. And if I end up not being able to fit everything I want in this space, then I might add a few more sentences up at the top. But usually I can tend to look at the space and then figure out how much I want to write and know if I need to leave lots of space between the words or cram it all together and things like that. That just comes with practice and writing a lot by hand. So if you're still not quite sure, pencil it in, draw lines, anything that helps. The more you do it, the easier it will get. With the writing added, now I have mostly gotten rid of that little problem area. I do have a little bit of trapped white space here, so I'll see if I can remedy that in my finishing touches. But I've also added a tiny little bit of writing at the top in two different places. And I find that once you get used to your handwriting on a layout, if you spread it around and put a little bit here and there, so instead of trying to cram everyone's names into the story bit, I've just added the names up here and added a little caption. I don't need to write on every single page the words Harry Potter because it's a whole album of pages about Harry Potter, but I can add little things that are enough to kind of keep that idea going. So the HP stickers and then studio tour in my own handwriting. So that way your handwriting becomes part of the embellishment. It becomes part of what is expected on your pages. Your handwriting does not have to be perfect, and it's definitely something that just gets easier with more and more practice. every time I write on my pages, I can hear the voice of my third grade teacher who kept me in at recess so many times because she told me that my writing would never ever be legible. My handwriting was horrible when I was young. So eventually I did get there, but it took me a very long time. And a lot of it was just sitting down and saying, okay, I want to make it better, and practicing letter by letter. So you can get used to it. I still don't love my handwriting every single moment of the day. Don't be really harsh on yourself and say, oh, my handwriting is horrible. It's still going to be important to other people. And it's something that nobody else can do. Everyone's handwriting is unique to them, and so it makes your pages that much more handmade. So that's my little story about handwriting there. Now, to add a little bit of finishing touch to something like this, I then want to come in and bring something that will bring it all together, but also something that will add a little bit of dimension and something different than just more paper. So this is why I tend to go to gems in the final stage, or I might do flicks of paint or glimmer mist. They kind of tend to do a similar thing, where you're just adding small elements. And I decided in this case I would go ahead and return to the purple just a little bit. So I have these purple gems, and they're in little strips, so I can just come in and add a little strip here and there to pull all the layers together. Wanted these two to touch the aqua paper a little bit. There we go. And that can help reconnect a color scheme that isn't really drawn from the photos. A lot of times you'll see people say that they always take the inspiration for the color scheme for their page from whatever color is in the photo. And that does work. And for years, when I worked in a scrapbook store, I did that for people all day long. They'd bring their photos in, and I would take their photos, and I would go to the card check rack, and I would choose 3 colors for them. But what I prefer is to use the colors that I really like and that I want to tell the story. That might be that I include colors from other pages in the album and things like that. Or it might be that sometimes colors have moods, and the mood of what you want to tell will match up with what you want to use. Sorry, I need to do one thing at a time. Clearly I'm not good at multitasking with gems. And then you can use a little tiny bit of something. So I've chosen colors that aren't from the photos, and now I can come back in and add just a little bit that is from the photos, and then it brings it all together. So I was cutting little strips of these gems to fill that gap. So now I have little sparkles of purple, and that's enough purple to bring it all back together. It doesn't have to be this crazy all purple page, and then it will fit really well in the flow of my album. So this is where I would call this done. Everything is really, really close together, and there aren't any big angles, so everything is either straight or just ever so slightly angled to give it a little bit of motion. And then you could make this even more embellished by having more layers, and you could tuck just tiny pieces. You can do little border strips and tuck them in if you want more layers, or you could spend more time adding little pieces that fit inside all the gaps of the embellishment. It's just a case of where you lie. There are people that would think the amount of embellishment that I use is insane and way, way, way too much, but there are also people that embellish 3-4 times as much as what I do. So everybody has room for their own style, and all of the different tricks can be used in no matter how much or little embellishment you want on your page. So this is one. I'm going to clean my table. I'm going to grab some more photos and walk you through a little bit more with a different page. So I'll pause it here so that you can see this one, and then I'll grab some completely different things and we'll start again. Okay, so switching gears a little bit from single page design and talking about white space, I wanted to show you just in brief a little concept that has really changed my getting motivated to scrapbook and things like that. And I talk about this more in detail in cover to cover, but I just wanted to kind of share it with you here. And that's the idea of having one album that's always ready to go with pages, so that it's an album in progress, but it's absolutely ready to go at any time. So what you can see here is a mix so far of completed pages, and then some of these are page protectors with photos where they're in the right spot in the time frame. But then there's also some gaps. There's a mix of old pages and new. So this page is very, very old. This page is a few years old, and this page is more recent. But then you'll find page kits with photos in the mix. So the whole album is kind of that mix. There's always some pages that are done. There are some pages that are ready to go. So maybe just the papers. Some will be full page kits with lettering, embellishment, and all of it. And that way, I always have something that's ready to go. If I'm lacking motivation otherwise, I know that I have this album that has page kits absolutely ready to just grab it and start scrapbooking. It has plenty of photos included as well, so there's lots of extra photos here at the back, and some spread throughout where I know where I want them in the storyline. But this just gives me a way to, sometimes you want to scrapbook, but you need to jump straight in. And you don't want all the extra bits and pieces of going through your stash and getting something. Or maybe you don't want to scrap at home. If you want to go to a crop and have everything ready to go, this is a really easy way to do it. And this is how I've started. I've kind of changed the way that I go to crops. This is what I take. So I do my page kits up, I put them in the album, I take the album with me, and then a toolkit. And that way, when I'm cropping, I can use the page kits that I've made. When the layout's done, it's automatically going right back in the album. So it's completely safe at the crop. It's completely safe for the journey home. And then I keep all the extra supplies in one extra page protector or plastic bag so that I can put them back in with my stash when I get home. So this is a page kit I've made a long time ago, and I haven't looked at it for several months. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the album aside and work with this, and we'll see what happens. But I just wanted to share that idea with you because it's something that's really changed how quickly I can start and get into the scrapbooking, because sometimes it's a bit of a mental block to get around the idea of, oh, I need to get to this, I need to get to that. When I was in a really, really small scrapbooking space in the home that we just moved from, I found sometimes it just took a lot of motivation to get to everything because of everything being so compact. So there are lots of, you'd have to move around quite a bit to get to everything. Just seeing what I have in here, because I honestly haven't even looked until just now. It's been in there for several months. And it can make everything just so much easier to just jump in. And I find once I start cutting and pasting and getting things going, then I have that motivation to find the papers that I want to go with something. I just need a starting point. I need somewhere to dive in. So this has been a huge help. And if you have scrapbook friends that you're lucky enough to have local scrapbooking friends, this is such an easy way to have something that's always ready there, so that you can call up a friend and say, look, I really need to do something creative this afternoon. Have you got any time? Let's go to one or the other's house, or to a park, or to a coffee shop, or wherever, and scrapbook, because you'll just need that album plus a basic toolkit. And when I go, I take scissors, adhesive, journaling pens, black and brown ink, pop dots, and I tend to also take an acrylic block in case I've got any stamps in my kits. That's pretty much it. If I can manage to take a little portable trimmer, then that's helpful as well. Okay, so I've unpacked all of this so I can see what I was thinking the day that I put this together. I have some black dotted Swiss cardstock, and if I do use cardstock as a background, I like things like black or also white, gray, craft, maybe cream sometimes. When I started scrapbooking, and for many, many years, I used almost all cardstock. I used lots of colors and hardly any patterns. And just as the paper quality has gotten better and the designs have become a bit more usable, I find that I go more and more for the patterns. But I do like every once in a while to kind of change it up and use a solid. And I like the dotted Swiss cardstock because it's not just solid. It has that polka dot texture to it, and that gives a bit more detail. So I'll plan on using that for the background probably. I have 3, I think, sheets of pattern paper here. So I have an orange grid from Amy Tangerine, which has black and white on the other side. A blue or turquoise chevron from Bella Boulevard that has multicolored clouds on the other side. And then this turquoise multicolored floral. It's like a doodly floral with hearts and stars in the mix too. This is an older paper from the Love Elsie collection, and it has a multicolored stripe on the other side. Okay, so those are the 4 papers I have. So when I picked this out, I was obviously thinking I would go with this mix of really bright hot pink, turquoise, orange color scheme. In lettering, I've got turquoise, wood grain, pink. I'm guessing I probably picked it out for the pink, but there's a little bit of potential there too. This one, the borders are striking me straight away because, and there's also the orange alphabet, but there's the pink and the turquoise in those border stickers and some of these little accents. That's from Bella Boulevard. This one was crepe paper, by the way. Some black thickers. This makes me laugh because I find things like this where I've put kind of a partial set of thickers in there. I swear I will have opened my drawer and looked for these 5 times and then decided that I must have gotten rid of the whole pack. But really it's because it's in a page kit. So once I do this layout with it, it'll go back in the drawer and I'll remember. This little, let's see if I can find something where you can see this. Plastic zip bag. This is from the Smash Book collection, like all the different things that go in Smash Books. They have these little printed bags that are essentially memorabilia holders. I don't have any memorabilia packed away with this photo, and I don't think that I have any memorabilia to go with it. So maybe I put journaling and some embellishment inside there, maybe some confetti. But they're quite cute designs, something a little different. A little turquoise and orange tag from Amy Tangerine sketchbook. Some small stickers from Bella Boulevard. These come in all sorts of different themes. They do one with most of their collection. They're just called miniatures stickers. And I think they're kind of marketed to do cards because they're all really small. But I find they're really useful as finishing touches on scrapbook pages. So if you want to have a look at something like that, if you like little small, clean, brightly colored embellishments, miniatures they're called, and I think they do one with almost every collection at Bella Boulevard. And then I have this photo. It's an old photo. It's a 4x6 photo, and it's a funny, crazy childhood picture. I'll briefly tell you that this is the amazing, crazy carpeting in our house in the 80s in the kitchen, and amazing evidence of 80s decor and 80s microwaves, and my dog at the time, and this was a big deal in my life. It was a portable ballet bar so that I could practice at home, which apparently I thought I would practice in jeans. So there we go. That's a crazy little picture to tell the story of all the hours I spent at my own little ballet bar as a kid. So these are all the supplies. I'm just going to have a moment to look at some boxes and consider a couple options really quickly, and then get started cutting and pasting. So, quick decision made. I'm going to go with one of the ways that I find easiest to start a page, and especially if I'm using some really bold, bright pattern papers, and that's to cut a 10 by 10 block from one of the papers. So I've started that with the blue or turquoise chevron. I'm just going to be adding black ink to all the edges of all the papers as I go, and then I'm going to attach this right to the center of the page. Now, if you're looking at the clouds and going, oh, I want the clouds on the layout instead of the chevron, don't forget I have the pieces that I've cut away from the page, so the it's not all over for the clouds. They could come back either on this project or another one. So start here, and then with a single photo I tend to pick a corner and go with it. Pick a corner and go with it. That can be a motto for single photo pages. So I'm going to go with this corner, and I know that I want the photo to kind of be in this sort of space, but I want to build up some layers behind. It's a vertical photo, so I'm going to create some horizontal layers so that I have that kind of difference or balance. I'm going to start with the solid color, the single color pattern, the orange grid, and make quite a wide strip from that one. And just like I did on that first layout, I'm just kind of looking at the pattern, so I just followed the grid and went to a spot that looked okay, and then chopped a little bit off the edge so that it wouldn't be quite the full 12-inch width, so that the black will make a frame all the way around. Now, I don't use that, I don't have to have a frame on every single page. Sometimes elements do go all the way to the edge. It just so happened that both these pages, 2 in a row, I wanted the background to have that frame. So let's go ahead and add this, making sure that there's enough turquoise at the bottom showing that it looks like it's on purpose, and I'm using the pattern again to line it up. Just following the line of the zigzag to get everything straight. And then, because I have 2 single colored patterns, it works well to then bring in the multicolored pattern that brings everything together. So I'm thinking I'll start, well, I also have this stripe. Here's an important thing. Sometimes the way that you look at a paper, so I'm looking at it top to bottom like this because of the strip, and I'm assuming that the stripes will go this way and they go this way. So I want a strip, a narrow strip that has all the colors in it. So I need to cut the branding strip off first and take that strip off the side. And that way, having the multicolored stripe gives me another piece that will bring all the colors together, but in a really simple motif. So I have that, and I'm just gonna, this side ends on red, so that'll work well to end this side on red. That's a happy coincidence. And then I can come back to the crazier pattern. And I think I'll make a very wide photo mat from that. So I'll cut a 4.5 by 6.5 piece. So that's considerably bigger than the photograph, but what I'll do is, with a busy pattern like this, if I take the photo, especially a busy photo with all these crazy different things inside, if I put it right on top like this, you're losing both the detail in the photo and the pattern. But if I put it off the center, then you can see more of it. I'm still not convinced. So have a look. It may be that I've chosen the wrong shape for this particular piece. Or it may just be that I can move things around. I think actually I like this as a solid block here, but now what I need is another layer as a photo mat behind that photo. It needs to be a single color. I don't have the single color I'm looking for. What I'm thinking is that a nice hot pink solid or single colored pattern behind the photo will make that, will bring it more to attention and separate the photo from the crazy pattern. So I don't have hot pink in the kit. I'm going to cheat a little bit and look in my scrap basket and see if I can find something that'll match. I had a little look and I found 2 different pieces with potential just in my scraps. So I had this multicolored heart print from the Amy Tangerine collection, same one as the orange grid, and this scenic root paper, which was hot pink, although it's hot pink with a red pattern on top and a kind of crazy barcode stripe on the back. I don't think this as a larger pattern works on the page, but in a small frame, it pretty much just reads as pink. You can't really see the red pattern. So that worked well for the photo mat, but I'm going to cheat a little bit and use both. So I had this piece cut at 4.5 by 6.5. This one is just ever so slightly bigger than the 4x6 photo, and then I've cut this one a little bit taller as well. And this way I have 3 pieces to make a little stack of photos, and then I can layer the stripes over the top and the photo on top of that. So ink the edges of this one. So sometimes you can take one crazy pattern and you put it on your layout and it's a little too crazy compared to everything else. And sometimes the trick can be to bring in more crazy. It doesn't always work. Sometimes less is more, but sometimes more is more. So in this case, bringing in this other multicolor pattern helps make this one seem a little less crazy and a little bit more usual. Now the trick to doing these little stacks of paper is to not make the angle nearly as big as you think. The idea is that you take a bunch of papers and you're stacking them up on your desk, but you don't get to that point where you tap them and get them all even. So they're almost there. And if you do things at huge angles, if it's like this, it doesn't look like a stack. That looks like I've tried to force the papers into a large group. So put them closer together than you think. That was a really technical hand movement there. Put them closer together than you think. There we go. Sign language for scrapbookers. It's a whole other world. This one on top, and I'm just using the grid paper to line that up. And then I can put the photo, and it's already got that very narrow mat on top of all that. And I can use the grid to make this one straight even though it's on top of all those others, because I can follow this line. And that should be straight. So now I have a good starting point for everything on the page, and I can start to look at embellishment. Now, this little strip was the branding strip of that heart paper, and I figure since I have it out, I might as well go ahead and include it as an embellishment. So I was just going to look for where it might fit. And I think what I'm going to do is break it up and use it on the other side than where you would naturally think. So this was on the right side of the strip, but it's not going to fit on that side of the page. But because I have all those other layers, I can move things around and pretend like it was written in the middle of the strip, essentially. So I can put this here. And then just use a little bit of it on the other side. As if it were completely meant to be that way, and the writing was always there. I'm just looking at this spacing at the bottom to make it look like it's all one piece. If it's too far, you can't, if there's not another piece there to judge it, just take something with a straight edge and put it up against the piece that you've already adhered, and then you can match it up there. Or you can use a ruler, but I find I always have lots of straight cut pieces of paper on the table, and it's just easier than going to get a ruler. So then I had, what else did I have in this amazing page kit that I had on my shelf for months? So I have this, and if I had thought about it, I would have put a color behind here that you could read. I'm really tempted to save this for something that has real memorabilia, and I don't have that here. I think what I'll do is I'll make a trade, and I will pop something else here that's a similar idea. So maybe if I can find a vellum envelope or something like that. That sounds promising. Okay, so I'm not 100% on that decision yet, but I'm going to pop that to the side for now, and that's what I'm thinking. I do want to include some of these border and accent stickers, so I think that's my next port of call. I found a vellum envelope, so I'm going to go ahead and swap out that idea. I'll save the plastic bag for another page, and I'll put this one in. Now, one thing I liked about the vellum with this crazy pattern is, because I really like this pattern, but it's also... It has dated a little bit. It's a little more cutesy than what I normally use, and I'm okay with that because it's a young photo, and cutesy feels right, and I'm not trying to force myself to use this pattern paper. I really do like it, so I want to use it, but I also don't want it to be really jarring when you look at the other pattern papers that I tend to use. It's a little different than my norm even, 4 or 5 years ago. So if I use the vellum envelope and put it over the top, look, you can still see that pattern, but it's just a little bit softer there in the center where it has that bright orange. So I think that will make me quite happy in general. So I'm going to go ahead and attach that. I'm going to pop it underneath this border here and behind the photo, but at an angle. Yet again, one of those times where it'd be easier if I planned ahead, but I didn't, so I'll just make it work. Okay, so I have that little gap there. And that would be a great place to put my journaling. The back of that heart pattern paper is a ledger print, so that's really easy to put my journaling on. So I can measure the pocket here. Put the side with the flower in. And then I know where to cut with my trimmer. For my journaling, I've written on this piece that's the whole pocket size, but then I wanted to carry on and I had this little bit of extras. So I'm just going to layer them both in the same little pocket, but I want it to be a bit more obvious that there is a second page. So a little tab from tape is a really easy way to do that. So just tear off a bit of tape and attach it to the front of the card. So you've got it attached there, turn it over and loop it back so that in theory you get this nice cleanly folded. And of course, because I've said do it like that, I've ended up with a wrinkle at the top. But the good thing with washi is that if it doesn't come out, you can always peel it off and try again. But that way, I can put these two pieces in the pocket and make it a little bit more obvious that there's more to be read, even if this piece falls behind a little bit. So that's all my writing done, aside from dates and names and things like that. I need to find a title, and now I can start on some embellishment. For the embellishment, I keep looking back at these border stickers, so I'm going to start with those. And I don't want to use the whole 12-inch strip. I just want to use smaller pieces so that I can layer them in the stack of photos and paper. So just add ink to everything as I go. And then because this has that little dotted detail, I want to make sure the dots still show. Oh, I should tuck this one underneath that strip, if I can pick that up. Well, I can pick the whole thing up and put it back again. And some of this pink, then I could maybe put on this other side. But if I put this behind here, you're going to see the edge of it behind the pocket. I'm not completely convinced about that. So I think instead, pop it behind the orange, and I'll add a little bit to the other side as well, so it looks like it goes all the way across. Of course, the smaller pieces are always the fiddliest. Right. That's a little cheat at making the 12-inch border. Since really there's nothing behind there. And this sheet also has these 4 turquoise corners. So I'm thinking they would be a nice little finishing touch for the big square around the page. And then I can come back, and the nice thing about the little pockets is that you can then add more things on top. So I can add my letter stickers across from the orange over the top and just to barely touch the photo mat. And that will pull all those different pieces there together, because the more layers you can bring together, the more cohesive the design will be. So just get these attached to the corners, and then I'll start spelling out my title. Of course, one of the most important things with sheets of letter stickers that you've already used is to make sure you can spell what you want to write before you start sticking. But it is one of the reasons that I include lots of different letter stickers in my kits, my page kits, because that way I have the flexibility in case the letters aren't all there for what I want to spell in a particular font. I can just move around and try the other fonts until I get something to work. So I want to fill in this gap, so I'm starting with that last letter of my title and I'm going to work backwards, and that way I know that I'm getting rid of any trapped space there, because it's all going to pull together just that tiny little bit over the top of the photo. And if you don't want anything to touch the photo, it's okay. You just run it over the photo mat, maybe make your mat a little bit bigger, and it will have the same effect. You don't have to have absolutely everything touching, I promise. I tend to start with a few of the larger letters, and then the smaller letters can be placed in the gaps. So when I look at the gaps that are naturally made by a title, you can look at letters where you have an ascender, like an H, where the letter goes up above the size of most lowercase letters. So now I have this natural little gap here between the ascender of the H and the T. And then I have another little gap here. And you can use those gaps to hold smaller letter stickers. So I want to include a little bit more writing and as part of the title, so I can place those letters in that gap and it will all read as one, because I'm using the natural spaces of the letters. It's actually something, if you start to use letter stickers or letter die cuts, it can actually be quite, I want to say fun. Is that bad? I think it's fun to find where you can find natural little spaces in the words and fill them in with smaller words. I don't know. Maybe fun is the wrong word. Maybe this is where I say, I'm not crazy, my mother had me tested. I'm not sure. Anyway, I promise you that it can be rewarding, at least. Can we go with rewarding? To find that what you want to include fits right in the gap that exists. That's quite good. So I'll tuck that underneath there. So there's my title. And for embellishment, I still want to include this little tag somehow, and it fits quite well here. So I'm thinking maybe it needs to be clipped to that pocket. And then I had those little miniature stickers. These make a good finishing touch. So let me just go ahead and I'll stick it to the pocket here. Make sure my glue is not going to get stuck on the journaling. But here, and then I'll see if I can find a good spot in that gap. And then I'll see if I can find a little clip to attach it at the top. I'm not sure about the angle there. Maybe if I move it away from that gap, because it's not a perfect fit, up to here, and I'm just at the edge there, so I could add a clip there. Okay, that'll work. I can put some twine through the top of the tag, and then have a look at what I have here. It'd be nice to bring in a little bit more of the orange. So I've got this little polka dot orange tag, and I have quite a lot going on over here, but a lot of empty space on the rest of the page. So I'm thinking I could make a little grouping up here in the corner, because I'm on the diagonal, and that would make everything match. I could bring in that orange washi again. Let's run a little line of this. Maybe it needs to go underneath this little photo corner. So I haven't taken the backs off those yet, so I can move that around. Now I've got quite a lot of orange, so I need some pink in the mix. See what different little word stickers I have in all these different little pieces. And nothing quite as pink as what I'm wanting. Maybe my better bet is to go back to the pink border sticker. Let's try that. Just cut another piece of that. And ink that to match. There we go. That'll start to bring in the pink. And I can go ahead and add this piece in. It still needs something else, but it's starting to be a better match. And then I can look at the different words. So maybe I can add in a bit more turquoise, and with the pink that should work. Maybe I just cover up the scallops. That works. So the pink becomes more like a pattern paper. And let's see. This little pink circle can go on the tag. Or next to it. No, I'll go with on it. Anything else that I've included on the page but not up here? That little strip. I had some more of that, and that would be a good little addition at the top of the page. And then I can go back to little scraps of the pattern papers that I've used, and sometimes those pieces next to the trimmer can just be just what is needed to finish it off. And I'm thinking if I punch a few little shapes from the heart pattern paper, because it's a very small pattern but it includes all the colors, I could put one or two up here, one or two down here, and that will be quite useful in finishing the page. And, well, it wouldn't be one of my projects if there wasn't a butterfly somewhere, so I'm just going to embrace that and go with punched butterflies for the embellishment that I was thinking of with those little hearts. So one of the reasons I use so many butterflies is because it comes in plenty of sizes, so I can have all different sized butterflies to match, but also just because I really like butterflies as a symbolic shape, and I'm particularly keen on the Martha Stewart this shape of butterfly, but I also really love the Jenny Bolin butterfly punch. But I don't love all butterfly punches. There are a few that are too skinny and strange to me. Plus, in real life, I love butterflies and I hate moths. Moths freak me out. So, there you go. You really didn't need to know that much about my thought process, but I thought I'd share anyway. So I'm going to add a few of these little butterflies all over the page. Some up here, some down here, and that will help pull things together. This is a smaller cluster, So it's a little easier to use the smallest pieces here. And with butterflies, I always fold them and then either do adhesive just on one wing or a pop dot. That way they look a little bit more dimensional rather than being glued to the page, which is rather depressing if you're a butterfly, I should reckon. So there we go. And then I can put the bigger one down on the page elsewhere, and I'll go ahead and use a foam square with that one. And I'm just looking for a place where it can overlap plenty of layers. So I'm going to put it here. Now I still have this little section to finish off, and I need to do the date somewhere. I think maybe this is a good spot for that. I'll have a look at what I want to do with this little gap, and then I'll be done with it. To finish this one, I was able to find a little clip finally to attach the tag to the little glassine envelope. And then, as a finishing touch this time, instead of gems, I went with buttons, and I wanted to show you that just because you work on the diagonal doesn't mean that that's the only direction you can work in. So in this case, I've also done a set of embellishments that mostly run along the horizontal. They kind of zigzag or create a really wide, short triangle across the horizontal. So I haven't added any buttons up here, and that's on purpose. So it gives this bit of the page a bit more weight and makes this just kind of a nice, cute little embellishment and nothing more. And that's okay. Sometimes that's what we want on our pages. So I've added 3 groups of 3 buttons. Each little grouping is slightly different, but the buttons are all the same 3 colors. And you'll notice if you look really carefully, the orange is not the same exact orange that's in the pattern paper. The turquoise is slightly different than what's in the pattern paper, and the pink is a bit paler. And that's part of why I've used the same 3 colors 3 times. Because if you then include that shade, okay, so it's a little bit different. If I include it again and again, it becomes on purpose. It becomes something that's supposed to be there and works because it has something else to match. Just like adding that little bit of purple to the other layout then was enough to bring all the purple together. So here it's a case of I started with these 3 buttons and then thought I should go ahead and duplicate that a few other times on the layout. Now most of the time I sew my buttons straight to the page, but in this case I want to be able to get things out of this pocket. So I've just I haven't actually sewn. I've used a needle and thread, but the thread only goes through to the back of the button, and then the back of the button is covered in glue and stuck to the layout. So that way I can still have the string and it looks like it's stitched down to something. And I could have stitched it just to this little tag, but I'm not quite sure that that would have added much more stability. So instead each one has thread and then it's glued to that area of the page. Okay, so that's 2 layouts in a lot more depth and detail and all the different steps than you would see in my normal blog or 2-piece videos. If you're not already somebody who watches my videos, you can subscribe here on YouTube to my own channel. And I also have a series, well, my sparkly friend Glitter Girl, she has a series every Wednesday. She has a new video on the 2 Peas in a Bucket channel. So those are all free to watch. And then I also teach classes. So there's a new class that starts next week if you want to join me, and you can find details of that at shamel.com. But what I really, really want to say is thank you so very much for contributing to the Girls Fund for International Day of the Girl. We raised £4,300 in the end, and I'm absolutely over the moon. I was hoping to beat our record of £1,500, so we absolutely smashed it out of the park. So I'm completely elated. I've chatted a lot more on this video than you would normally hear me get to kind of just chat and ramble. So I hope you enjoyed. It's a little something different, and thank you so very much for supporting a cause that is so near and dear to my heart. Thank you all so much, and happy scrapbooking.